So in our case, we use a refrigerant, and it can actually boil and become very high pressure at room temperature. You take a low temperature heat source, creates a high pressure that propels through a pipe and comes into the turbine case right here. It spins the turbine, and that rotational motion is ultimately what powers the plant. That turbine is connected to a generator over here, and that's where we get the power. This is what's connected to the grid.
After the vapor leaves the turbine, we need to convert it back into a liquid. And so we do that in the condensers. Vapor comes down through this pipe inside this chamber, where there's hundreds of little tubes inside this big tube. And the cold seawater passes through these little tubes, and on the outside of them, the ammonia senses the cold, and then it's converted into a liquid and drips down to the bottom where it continues the cycle.
The waters around Hawaii are very stable in terms of temperature, and that allows us to extract a very steady source of power year-round. It's utility-grade electricity, so it doesn't need an inverter, it doesn't need to be filtered.
So that's OTEC, Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion. I don't know why this one. Get out of here.
Like that and try.
Cool, thank you. So that's Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion. Yeah.
Okay, so where do they get the freeze the purpose
The ammonia or refrigerant. Where do they get it?
Yeah, or how is it made to like, even though like, it has a low boiling point,
Uh-huh.
so how they know they're like, hey, we can just plug this in and it'll easily do that.
How do they know to do that?
Yeah.
Engineering. That's where like engineering comes. So there's within mechanical engineering there's a section of that called thermodynamics, which talks about heat transfer and things just like this, about how like pressure and temperature are related and different working fluids and things like that. So this kind of concept of things boiling at room temperature has been around for a long, long time. And that's how we've always, that's what's in your refrigerator in your house. It's what's in your air conditioner. So they're just really clever, I guess. And whoever thought of this concept, it's really cool. It's very stable, which again is a really attractive thing as far as renewable energy is concerned, because like you said, they have really consistent water temperatures. But it does take some pretty specific requirements. So like you would never work in the Caribbean because it's too shallow there, and they don't see those huge temperature differentials like they would like in Hawaii. Hawaii like drops off and it just like plummets like thousands of feet, I think. So they can find really large temperature gradients which make this work. Yeah, you have a question?
Kind of integrate. So it would only be able, like this system would only work in places that have like all warm water all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to have cold at the bottom and warm at the top all the time. If you don't have those two things, it simply won't work. Just like people ask us like about our buoy, like, so if there's no waves, does it still work? No, it doesn't. those are like things you have to have. And in Hawaii, they have so that kind of narrows unfortunately, kind of narrows the geographic applications of this, I guess, to only a handful of places in the world, maybe. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of places in the world, but it really limits where this can be utilized. Because you have to have warm surface water, and you have to have really cold deep water for this to work. You guys ready to talk about wave energy? All right, wave energy, my favorite. This is a really cool picture. I thought this was pretty rad. This is a company called Polemis, and they're out of business now, unfortunately, due to the what happened in like 2008 and stuff like that. And then there was a big pullback from renewable energy technologies from investors.
That's okay.
That's when the normal people get here, not the
normal
overachievers.
people can come in too.
So anyway, this is a really cool one. This is called an attenuator. I'll talk more about these different types, but this is almost like a sea snake, and it's a pretty sweet looking device. And it's kind of like what you were kind of getting at, I think, like what if you made it flexible, so it fit between waves. That's kind of what this system does. So one of the reasons I really love what I do is because when I was in engineering school, my biggest fear was like sitting in a cubicle all day long and like filling out a spreadsheet on why this doorknob will not break or something like that over and over and over for the rest of my life. I was really scared of like the stereotypical monotony that you might think of when you think of engineering. Wave energy industry is like the Wild West. It's just crazy. Like there's so many cool things out there, and nobody's really figured out the silver bullet, the magic answer. So, like now you see wind turbines out there, and they all have 3 blades. They all look identical. They can be from a completely different manufacturer from the other side of the world, but they'll look pretty much the same. Wave energy devices, as you can tell, they're not that way. So people are still, there's just so much cool innovation happening. This first one here this is the Polemis device. It's called an attenuator. It's like a sea snake. It's got, as waves pass, it does like kind of this flexing motion, and they have hydraulic cylinders in between the joints of this thing that as it flexes, they use those to pump water back and forth, or hydraulic oil. Then they use the hydraulic oil to spin a turbine, which makes power. This is called the Oyster. And also, one thing to note, look at how massive these things, there's nobody standing there, but that thing is huge. That thing is obviously huge. There's a guy there standing next to it. These are really big devices. This is called a surge device. And this is like a hinged flap that sits on the seafloor. As a wave passes, this flap kind of does this, And again, there's these big hydraulic cylinders right there and right there. That as that flap kind of moves back and forth, it pumps hydraulic fluid through a turbine. Actually, a professor that we're working with at UNCW, he's in the environmental science department, did a lot of the environmental impact studies for this device right here in Portugal, which is kind of cool. He's a really cool guy. I'll say these 3 are pretty similar. These are all called point absorbers, which is like what our buoy is. And a point absorber is a system that just bobs up and down. It's like the simplest form of wave energy converter. And what's cool about a point absorber is it doesn't care which direction the wave is coming from. It doesn't care the shape of the wave too much. It just wants to move up and down. If it's doing that, it's going to do work. So these are point absorbers that are fixed to land, and as a wave kind of comes up towards the shore, it lifts these big floats, and they drive hydraulic cylinders here, big pumps. This one is kind of similar to our system. It's got a big thing called a heave plate down here, which is like an underwater parachute that as it rises and falls, it pulls against the parachute and drives a pump that's almost like a bicycle pump. If you think like a bicycle pump you use to pump up a bike tire, imagine if you like strapped a bicycle pump to the ocean floor and then hooked a float up to it. So as this thing bobbed up and down, it was moving the pump. That's kind of how this one works. And the same with this one. This is a submerged point absorber. It's called a submerged pressure differential point absorber. And these are really cool because when you look at it from the surface, you see nothing. Like ships and stuff can go right over these things, and they're completely hidden. The downside to these systems is everything's underwater. So if you want to service them, or we said when you have to service them, it's really expensive. The approach we've taken with Stardust is to keep everything that's important above water. Anything you'd ever have to touch with a wrench or change, or could really corrode, we want to keep above the surface of the water. But with these systems, they have a bladder in here. Yeah, it's like a rubber bladder. It's really crazy. With some air, and as a wave passes, the pressure increases as the depth of the water increases over this thing, and it causes this whole buoy to sink. And then as the wave moves away, it causes it to float again, and it just does this up and down motion that drives pumps. This is called a Sea Dragon. This was designed by, I think it was a Japanese company that built this a long time ago. This is it's an oscillating water column device is what it's called. So there's this chamber in here. As a wave passes, water rushes in this chamber and it fills the chamber up. And what that does is as the chamber fills up, it forces the air that was then in the chamber out through this turbine, and it spins the turbine. So it's like kind of like wind energy, but the wind is kind of generated by waves coming in and out of that chamber. So this is the last one I had. I just had a video that kind of talks about wave energy. So if there's any questions, we can start right now because I'm going to run up to the bell, or if you're going to stop
Let's
right
answer the questions first.
Yeah.
First question, the things that you guys showed, do they have to like go through a small calibration before they like start actually connecting?
The things that
Like the water, they have to have like a small calibration of like, okay, so I know the waves are gonna do this, so like the intake is gonna be this much.
I see what you're saying, like the whole device itself, the whole thing. That's an interesting, I have an interesting answer for that. So a lot of wave energy companies right now are really trying to get extremely precise and academic with their devices. So they're doing a lot of wave tank testing, and they really want to fine tune specific devices to specific places. But it's really expensive. Our approach to do all that research, to have a different model for every situation, basically, to have this ultra refined system that we have, PhDs from MIT spending thousands of hours analyzing how it moves in waves. That's really pricey, and because of that, nobody's really had a successful wave energy system yet. Because they build these things in labs, and then they immediately try to go from this lab prototype because they think they know everything about it now. They build this giant device, and then a shackle or something breaks on the huge device, and it costs them more to tow their device in than it does for our company to exist it for 3 years. because they try to make these huge leaps because they think they have a huge understanding. Our philosophy is we want this thing to just be simple, robust, rugged, and it's really universal. So there would be no fine tuning basically for our system. So we would look at the average wave amplitude, the max and the min, see what the biggest waves that place may see over 50 years. And then we make sure that we just have enough travel to accommodate that so the system doesn't just like break away if a huge wave comes. But other than that, there's very little refinement, I'd say. And they're pretty much a one-size-fits-all or more of a modular approach is what we're taking. So if somebody needs more water, instead of designing a new system, we just drop another buoy next to it. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's not really about wave energy, but in your studies, did you ever encounter like the idea of a self-sustaining system that uses a small amount of power to generate a greater amount of power and then powers itself and has usable excess energy?
Definitely. I mean, that's kind of what our system does now.
Mm-hmm.
It I think a perfect example was that OTEC system I just showed you.
That's what
They
got
have
me.
a pump. They have an electric pump, and they generate the power. They use the surplus energy that they generate to run the system. So yeah, it takes a little bit of power to even run their system, and they generate that little bit of power as well as extra. So even like that nuclear power plant. I had an internship at that nuclear power plant, that's why I'm bringing it up. They do the same thing. That power plant itself needs a whole lot of power to run, but they just kind of bleed off a little bit of what they produce to drive the.
But even the OTEC system, it still requires an external source. You know what I mean? So have you ever?
It requires an external source for startup,
Mhm.
but once the thing starts running, it can generate its own power to keep it going.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then also generate a lot more power to send back to the grid for people to use. Any other questions? Yeah. You're loaded.
So of course, I want to go into like ocean engineering school, like in fourth period technology. How does one find a job for that? And you said like your professor told you to do that, but I just like I don't want to just hopefully get part of someone's career and then go do research. But then for this, you also need funding, so how would you like to pay for this as a job?
Well, so this is my job and my career right now, and it's interesting. That's like a whole other topic. That's like entrepreneurship, I guess. But there are lots of jobs out there. Generally, what was kind of cool about engineering is almost the entire, I would probably say 85% of my graduating class had a job lined up before they even graduated. I will say a lot of them, it wasn't the job that they wanted to keep, and they've done a lot of switching around. How you find the job that you want and that's right for you is a tricky one because it's not necessarily tricky to find the job it's not tricky to find the job you want, it's tricky to find out what job you want. You know, because I always thought I wanted to work for like NASA or something like a kid. That would be really boring to me because I would just like sit with people and do calculations all day long. You know? So finding out what job you want and like internships are a great way to do that, I think. I'd say a huge thing is if there's something you have interest in, like go look for it, you know? Check it out.